Hey everybody, welcome to Trading Capital here on this lovely Friday, April 29th. Jumping right into the S&P, and let me just clean up my chart for a second. All my day trading lines are on here. Flipping to the daily, let's just clear everything off. Start fresh, shall we? Since it was a tremendous sell-off on the S&P 500. So right away, I'm going to be putting in these channels here, just so that we have a basis of where our support levels, and I'm going to try to line up like that. So we have this pivot here as resistance, these pivots, this pivot, and you can see these two pivot tops here. So this is the range that we've been ping-ponging in for quite some time now. Today you can clearly see on the S&P 500 a nasty sell-off, down 3.7% on the day. This is why, it's funny, I had one of my long-term investors comment on my positions and saying, you have a lot of shorts on the market. Aren't you nervous of having so many shorts in the market? And honestly, at this point in time, just with the amount of stocks that had high PEs, specifically the big cap techs, no, I'm not scared of having shorts on this market because of the macroeconomic backdrop of the Federal Reserve tightening policy and fighting inflation. So you can see that we negated these critical pivot lows here, completely broke it. Let me just change these to yellow so we can see them clear. Now the next big level is that one. And if you get through this big pivot low, that's going to send some major shockwaves to the market. You can see we came into all of this support here with today's price action, and we are having a little bit of intraday bounce off of the lows. Now the markets, in my opinion, are a tad bit oversold. That being said, the S&P can come down to this level, the bottom of this channel, if you were to make a new low on the charts. But I am expecting some sort of a bounce soon. I think it's only a matter of time before you start getting a bounce potentially up to here, and then looking to roll over down here before the next down leg starts. So let me just put another arrow in there. So I think the price action is going to look something like that, where you get some sort of a relief. There are a lot of oversold names. Amazon's, now potentially oversold. Netflix, PayPal, the likes of SoFi, all these other companies. I mean, SoFi's not on the S&P, but all the other big ones are starting to come into oversold levels that could favor some sort of a bounce very soon. You are trading a decent amount of distance from the 50-day moving average, so it stands to suggest that as you come into support and an oversold condition, a bounce is certainly favorable. Ultimately, this market is heading much lower. I mean, there's going to be tons of bounces along the way, but if you simply look at where we were trading before, if you take these pivot highs here and this pivot high here, and you carry this trend line forward, let me just change my tool, I think you're at least coming into this sort of this top of this channel for a bounce, and even lower than that. But you can definitely count on the S&P breaking that 400 level, which we have not seen in a substantial amount of time, basically back here in April of 2021. So we're coming into that time frame where we're hitting critical levels of support, and some people are still in denial that we're heading into a recession. I personally think we are. This news coming on the back that the US GDP surprisingly missed growth. It actually declined this first quarter. Now, we've been talking about a recession and declining GDP, and now often when you're in a recession, often when the technical recession hits, which is basically 2 consecutive quarters of declining GDP growth, when you can classify the recession from that term, it's often 6 months into the recession before you can call it a recession. And a lot of things, if you're the last to the party that thinks the recession isn't coming, then 6 months later the recession hits, you're technically 6 months behind me and a lot of other smarter investors who foresaw this potential recession looming a long time ago, with the fact that you have high inflation, you have the Federal Reserve introducing quantitative tightening, you have the raising of interest rates, you have supply chain disruptions, a war. There's so many factors to the downside macroeconomic factors that you had to consider when investing and why it's a probable outcome that a recession is to occur. Let's look at the QQQ here. Same thing, we also have this parallel channel. The interesting thing about the QQQ is you broke your two major pivots. So the triple bottom basically did not hold. You also broke these key pivots here. So that's a key level of support. And the interesting thing about the Qs is if we actually zoom in here, you filled this gap on the chart and look where you came to. Boom. Technical support on this chart, bounced right off of that gap fill. Is that cool or is that cool? That's why I love technicals. The gap fill was totally called there. I mean, this gap was specifically important because it came in down at a straight shot into that gap. Now, I'm certainly on the camp that you see some sort of a bounce up, but there is a chance that you could have a flush down here on Monday before you bounce up. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, is that I am favoring a bounce up initially, but if you don't get a bounce off this level, it's likely that you get a bounce off of this level. We will be buying the Qs down here for a swing trade along with other stocks as well to potentially benefit from an oversold bounce. You are approaching some next pivotal supports here. There's a little bit of support right in this bar here, and then obviously your big one would be these major pivots here. So it connects with the pivot high, another pivot high, and another pivot zone before you had a nice breakout. You had your retrace. So this is why this is going to be a huge zone, this bottom one. And it's because you've had this pivot high, retrace back down, came through, broke, retrace back to the original resistance point, which is now support, bounced off of that, ripped up, came all the way back down to test this line again as support and bounced up, and basically you've never looked back from all this time up until you're approaching this level. So that's going to be a big level. These multiple pivot zones of support around the 297 on the QQQ. So again, a hard sell-off. We're happy to be shorting many positions via inside the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. The big loser on the day, which we'll go over in later videos, is Amazon. We also had Apple down. I just want to show something to you, or say something to you. But out of all the mega caps, so let's go to this mega cap screen. These are the 40 biggest companies in the world. Okay, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, all goes in from biggest to smallest. Look at the decline again. We were not seeing these type of days in the markets. A broad sell-off. Every sector was being hit. And when you look at this list, there was only one company that managed to survive, and it was Merck. And if you pull up this chart, I'm so disappointed that I missed this chart, but this is a great short level. I'm salivating at this potential short